The smell hit Captain Viril before the airlock finished cycling. Stale, sharp, undercut with some pungent organic notes that stung whatever passed for a nose among the Scalari. He stepped back, subtly not from fear but from instinct. The Terran ship Thresher, barely holding its orbit and belching heat signatures like a dying sunfish, had docked crooked into Docking Bay 12. Its hull bore deep gouges and scorched patches. This was not a diplomatic visit. It was survival, dragging itself in on shredded boots. Viril turned to the engineer beside him, a lean Zathare female named Relka. That smell, what is it? Burnt ozone, maybe? Their coolant systems were ruptured. It could also be them, she said. Them? Humans. The docking light turned green. The airlock hissed open, belching warmth and that same dense stink. Out stumbled a man in torn pressure gear, dragging a storage crate twice his size by one hand, the other hand cradling his midsection. His left arm hung at a grotesque angle, the suit fabric dark and stiff with dried blood. His breathing was ragged, shoulders hitching with each step. He didn't even blink at the wall of armed Scalari guards. "Which one of you is the boss here?" the man asked, voice hoarse, face filthy, but eyes alert. "I need a doctor, fuel, and about 24 replacements for my heat shielding, preferably in that order." Viril stepped forward, too stunned to formulate a response at first. "You are, you the captain." "Technically," the man said, slumping to the floor. "I was the only one awake when the asteroid field showed up where it wasn't supposed to be." Relka scanned him with her wrist link. "Left radius fractured, 2 ribs cracked, probable pulmonary bruising. He's running on adrenaline, maybe narcotics?" "Only coffee," the man muttered. Viril crouched. "You didn't radio for help." "We did. Nobody answered." "You didn't use Galactic Band Alpha?" The man squinted at him. "We did." "Impossible. Every port within 50 light years would have received it." "Well, Captain," the man leaned back against the crate, "looks like I just solved a mystery. You guys hear about Earth? Blue marble, backwater, full of bad ideas and worse music." "Yes," Viril said cautiously. The man grinned, then winced. "That's where I'm from. And we've got a saying, no one shows up unless they're getting paid or it's on fire. Looks like neither applied to us." Viril narrowed his eyes. "You are implying that the Galactic Union ignored a distress signal. That's a severe accusation." "No," the man said, dragging in a breath. "I'm telling you. My name is Chase Dalton. You want a full report? Great. Just make sure your medbay has morphine, gauze, and someone who knows how to reset a dislocated shoulder." Relka turned to Virlum. "We should transport him immediately. He's borderline hypoxic." "I'm fine," Chase said. "You're bleeding internally," she snapped. "Yeah, that happens when you bounce off your own control panel." 2 hours later, Chase was propped on a stiff bed in the Scalari Station infirmary, left arm splinted and elevated, ribs wrapped, bruising around his torso already darkening. His face had been cleaned, revealing a mess of freckled skin, a fresh gash above one brow, and the stubborn expression of a man who'd spent too long solving problems no one else would touch. A medtech fussed over his vitals, while Viril reviewed a transmission log. "There was a signal," Viril said at last, "broadcast on the correct band. It originated from the Thresher, priority level 3. "That's an emergency," Relka said. "No," Chase corrected, wincing as he shifted. "Level 3 for us. For you guys, it's like someone scraped their fender. Your protocols downrank us." "Why would that be?" Chase gave him a flat look. "Why do you think Earth doesn't get visitors unless someone's lost or conscripted?" Relka tilted her head. "The Council has repeatedly stated that your species is difficult." "You mean unstable?" She didn't answer. "Too violent, too chaotic, too unpredictable. We don't integrate well. We don't follow orders. We're stubborn. We improvise. We keep winning the wrong wars. And now we've got warp drives made out of recycled mining equipment and shielding duct tape to hull plating because no one will trade us the real stuff." Viril frowned. "That's a serious allegation." "No," Chase said again, tone sharpening. That's a summary. Look, I'm not mad, I get it, we're a lot. But you're asking the wrong question. What's the right one? Why is Earth still out here, if you all decided we're not worth helping? 2 days passed. Chase remained in the med bay, monitored and dosed on a strict schedule. Human bones, the staff quickly learned, didn't heal overnight. The fractured radius had to be pinned and casted, and the pulmonary bruising was painful enough to leave him winded with minor movement. He wasn't cleared to walk until day 3, and even then only with assistance. Viril visited daily. "You're recovering," he observed. Chase, hunched on the edge of his bed, nodded slowly. "Painkillers are doing their job. Still hurts like hell, though. I've been reviewing your logs." "Which ones?" "From the last 18 hours before your ship docked." Chase leaned back. "You mean the part where I rerouted power through the forward thrusters using salvaged reactor coils and a hot-wired food processor?" Relka, who stood at the foot of the bed, cleared her throat. "That shouldn't have worked." "It didn't. Not fully. But it gave me enough power to coast the last few thousand clicks without boiling my lungs." Viril took a seat. "Why didn't you wait for rescue?" Chase's jaw tensed. "There wasn't one coming. We would have—" "You didn't," Chase snapped, then flinched. "Sorry, that was too loud." "You have every right," Relka said quietly. "I spent 5 hours trying to stabilize the core temperature manually, then I blacked out. Woke up with a coolant leak and half a nav map. Nobody pinged me. Nobody hailed me. I kept going because if I didn't, I was dead." "You were alone?" Viril asked. Chase looked down. "My co-pilot didn't make it. Pressure breach. She was right next to the ruptured conduit. I didn't even have time to seal it." Silence settled in like fog. "I'm sorry," Viril said. "Yeah," Chase murmured. "So am I." By the end of the week, Chase could stand without support. He was pale, still tender along his ribs, and careful with his left arm, but he was walking and watching, always watching. He asked too many questions. Why was the refueling process so indirect? Why did supply manifests require 4 different authorizations? Why was medical triage on a rotational cycle instead of need-based urgency? Viril finally asked him why. "Because that's why nobody comes for us," Chase said. "You've made space so efficient it's fragile. We're messy, we improvise, we break protocol to keep people alive, and that's terrifying to you." "Not terrifying," Viril replied. "Incompatible." Chase smiled tiredly. "Right. That's why Earth has no friends." Relka leaned forward. "It's also why you survived." Chase looked at her. "What?" "I ran your life support patch through 6 simulations. It shouldn't have worked. You created a pressure equalization using nothing but cabin humidity and redirected waste heat. That's not innovation. That's madness." "But it worked." "Yeah." Werner sat back. "And that's why we're having a very difficult discussion in the council right now." "About what?" "About reclassifying humans from unfit for integration to necessary under extreme conditions." Chase barked a laugh, then grimaced. "That's the most backhanded compliment I've ever gotten. We're also reviewing why none of our ships responded to your call. That's a failure in protocol we cannot ignore." "No," Chase said. "That's a failure in your whole worldview." Relka blinked. "Explain." Chase pointed toward the docking bay. "I'm going to need 6 weeks minimum to heal. But if you gave me a wrench in 2 hours, I could rig a communications repeater that covers 100 clicks in all directions and costs less than your lunch. Not because I'm smarter, because I've had to. Earth taught me that. We're not better, we're just used to being ignored." He stood slowly, swaying. "And the next time one of your ships is floating out there in silence, choking on its own CO2 because a data packet got misfiled, you're going to wish someone like me was on board." Viril didn't respond. He didn't have to. Chase limped out of the med bay and back toward the thresher. He had repairs to make. The refit bay was too clean for Chase Dalton's liking. Nothing rattled, nothing dripped. No stale smell of burnt fuses or leaking coolant. The walls practically gleamed. Diagnostic drones zipped around like polite bees, recording everything, interfering with nothing, and utterly incapable of understanding what a human meant by, "Just hold this here while I calibrate it." Chase, one arm still braced and bandaged beneath his borrowed coveralls, stared at the warped shielding plate he'd hauled off the thresher. His left side ached constantly now, less like a scream, more like a throb that had made a permanent home under his ribs. He'd refused stronger painkillers. His hands had to be steady. Verl hadn't argued. Neither had Relka. The thresher sat like a battered mule at the far end of the bay, its hull patched in 3 places with what Chase assumed was alien-grade equivalent of ceramic-reinforced plating. They'd offered to fully overhaul her, but Chase declined. Trust was still pending. "You need a scaffolding lift," Relka said, walking up behind him. "You're favoring your right leg." "It's fine," Chase muttered. "You limped." "Favoring's not limping, it's tactical energy conservation." Relka looked at him sideways. "You humans name everything when you're avoiding help. That's how we survive. If you name the pain, you can argue with it." She handed him a hydro pack. "Drink. You've been standing too long." He took it and nodded his thanks. The water was too pure. Earth water had grit. This stuff tasted like hospital walls. He drank anyway. A mechanic drone whirred over, dropping a new external power conduit twice the needed length. Chase looked at it, then at the drone. "Typical," he muttered. "All tech and no sense." Relka frowned. "It's tuned for standard metrics." "Exactly, no imagination." Chase walked it back, gingerly lowered the coil, and got to work retrofitting the adapter plate. One-handed again. Every motion reminded him he wasn't at 100%, not even close. "You shouldn't be doing this," Relka said after a pause. Chase kept working. "You had a collapsed lung. 3 days ago you couldn't walk across the room." 4, Chase corrected. "And if I don't recalibrate this feed, we're going to burn through our power reserves every time we drop into high atmo. The coupling's too wide." "Then use a drone." Chase turned. "Relka, I appreciate the help, I really do. But your drones don't know how to fix a problem that wasn't supposed to exist. And you don't either. Not because you're not smart, because you're too used to things working the way they're supposed to. I don't have that luxury." She watched him, unreadable. "And that's why you think we didn't respond?" He dropped the tool, flexed his fingers. "I know that's why." Relka sighed. "The Council's unhappy? Your report forced a review of every emergency protocol involving Terran-class vessels. Turns out there's an entire tier of automated filters flagging human distress calls as non-critical." Chase didn't look surprised. "How long's that been in place?" "Decades. It wasn't malicious. The early years of human expansion were noisy. Dozens of calls a week, fires, system failures, arguments, sabotage. Some of them fake. Some amusingly real." "Yeah," Chase said with a bitter smile. "That sounds about right." By the time some of the filters adapted, they deprioritized anything labeled Terran. By the time people noticed, it was buried under 3 different code revisions and a pile of bureaucratic excuses. He exhaled slowly, leaning against the hull. "So, we weren't being ignored. Just filed under, not our problem?" Relka looked away. "It was a mistake, one we're working to correct." Chase rubbed his face. "Earth never stood a chance, did we? Everyone else came to space with unity councils and peace mandates. We strapped a rocket to a bomb and called it close enough. And yet here you are." "Barely." She nodded toward the medbay doors across the bay. "You're scheduled for a bone scan this evening. If the pins are settling, we can reduce the cast by next week." He gave a tired thumbs up. "Yay, more scans." 2 days later, Chase sat in front of the Union Inquiry panel, flanked by Viril and Relka. 3 alien representatives observed him from behind a translucent barrier. One of them, a long-necked essery diplomat with fractal irises, tapped a stylus against his pad. "Mr. Dalton, you're still recovering from multiple injuries. We can postpone this deposition." Chase shifted in his chair, left arm resting on a low sling. "No offense, counselor, but Earth time is Earth pain. I'd rather get this done now." The panel watched him carefully. "You believe Earth has been systematically isolated. I know it, maybe not on purpose, maybe not malicious, but it's happening." Counselor Trev raised his stylus. "In your own words, what do you believe makes your species incompatible with the current galactic model?" Chase stared at him. "We don't fit in neat boxes. Please elaborate." Chase folded his good arm. "You plan everything to the decimal, your food, your fuel, your lives, but you don't plan for things to break. You don't expect failure. Humans do. We train for it. We're a species that spends millions of dollars simulating crashes we hope never happen. That's not inefficiency. That's how we stay alive." The counselor leaned forward. "And this is what you believe the Union fears?" "No," Chase said. "You fear what it means. That our way of surviving messy, loud, sometimes stupid, isn't just valid. It's sometimes better when things go wrong. And out here, things go wrong a lot." Trev's expression didn't change. "We've never had a formal war with your kind. You didn't have to. You wrote us off before we got through the front door. And now?" Chase looked around the room. "Now you're realizing we're still here, still alive, still crawling through space with busted ships and half-baked tech in this unshakable habit of trying again, whether you like it or not." There was a long silence. Trev set down his stylus. "This session is concluded. We'll issue our findings within 48 hours. Chase didn't reply. He was too busy trying not to pass out from the effort of standing up. That evening, Relka found him sitting alone in the hangar observation deck, staring out at the stars. "Any word?" she asked. Chase shook his head. "I think they're debating whether Earth deserves a second chance. Or a warning label. You weren't wrong. That's not the same as being welcome." She sat beside him. "There's talk of reforming the emergency network, including human-rated overrides." Chase blinked. "That's new. It won't fix everything, but it's a start." He looked down at his hands. The bruises were fading, slowly. The arm still hurt, the ribs ached with every breath. He wasn't better, not yet, but the station didn't feel quite so cold anymore. "Relka," he said after a moment, "you think Earth will ever be part of this galaxy for real?" She considered it. "Only if the galaxy starts breaking down more often." He laughed, then winced, then laughed again, softer. "I guess that's one way to make friends. By being useful in a crisis? No. By being the guy who shows up when no one else does?" 6 days after the inquiry, the Kargathi freighter Velen's Favor tore open its primary coolant conduit mid-jump, skidded into real space on the edge of Station Eurus, and slammed into a decon research pod with all the grace of a falling dumpster. It began venting plasma, jammed its internal hatches shut due to a failsafe misfire, and then promptly lost comms. Every support vessel on the station hung back. Too hot, too unstable. Protocol required containment assessments, thermal modeling, risk stratification, minimum 3 hours before any approach. Chase Dalton was already suiting up by the time the alarms hit the second tier of decks. "You're not certified for extravehicular ops," Relka said, catching up with him at the evac lockers. "Nope," Chase replied, cinching the belt on his repair rig with one good arm. "But I know what it looks like when a pressure conduit seizes. You wait 3 hours, that freighter goes nova. You're still healing. Your radius is barely knitted. I won't need to do push-ups, just float and twist." Relka scowled. "The nav thrusters on your suit aren't calibrated for your weight. Then I'll be light on snacks." "You're being reckless." "No, I'm being human. We don't wait for the perfect conditions." The comms beeped. It was Viril. "I've overridden the airlock sequence." His voice came through, flat but tight. You have 5 minutes. That's all I can buy before Central takes control. Copy, Chase said, and bolted. His ribs howled. The arm inside his brace ached with every shift. But he moved, focused, and felt a clarity he hadn't tasted since the thresher cracked open like a soda can in an asteroid belt. The balloon's favor spun slowly, bleeding glow from one side, flickering lights in the rear. Chase hit the hull hard, magnet clamps locking on with a jolt that knocked the breath out of him. He muttered something unrepeatable and crawled toward the breach. He reached the emergency panel, found it fused shut. Of course it is, he whispered. He pulled his multi-tool and got to work. Inside the command center, Relka and Vril watched the external cams. He's slowing, Relka said. Breathing rates rising, Vril added. Relka's jaw tensed. This is insane. People, he knew the risk. He shouldn't have had to. Vril didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the screen. Chase wedged the panel open after 8 agonizing minutes, sweat soaking into his collar despite the chill. He rerouted the thermal override through a backup port, forced a manual systems reboot with a trick he'd learned bypassing safeties on a Terran grain hauler, and watched the lights flicker back to life. He activated his comm. Station, this is Dalton. Internal locks are down. Emergency hatches just cycled. You've got 15 people unconscious in there and maybe 3 minutes before the second conduit lets go. Get your teams moving. He pushed off, aiming back toward the station. He felt slow, limbs dragging. Pain singing through his ribs now, sharp and electric. His vision narrowed. The magnetic tether caught him mid-drift and reeled him in. He woke up 2 hours later with a saline in one arm and a stern-faced med tech leaning over him. Stable, the tech said, but you aggravated everything. Your bone alignment's holding by luck and bad decisions. I'll take both, Chase croaked. Relka stepped into view. You were unconscious for 4 minutes post-extraction. We almost put you under full suspension. I'm still good, he rasped. You're reckless, she snapped, and not in a heroic way, in a self-harm way. Did the crew survive? She paused. Yes. Then I'll take the bruises. She crossed her arms. There's going to be fallout. From the Union? No, from the freighter's crew. They're writing a petition. He blinked. Against me? No, to include Earth-certified responders in all Tier 1 emergency lists. He stared at the ceiling. That'll go over well. It's already in motion. He didn't reply. His ribs hurt too much to laugh. 3 days later, still limping and restricted from lifting anything heavier than a datapad, Chase was summoned to Central Hall. The Grand Delegate of Systems Integration was waiting, a massive, plum-colored horkill with ornate robes and a disdainful expression. Chase Dalton, the delegate said, inspecting him as if Chase were a dented microwave. You've caused quite the disturbance. I wasn't trying to, Chase said carefully, just responding to a need. The Kargathi freighter was not under your jurisdiction. Your medical status was not cleared. Your equipment was not calibrated. Correct. And yet, without your interference, we would have lost 13 beings and a station sector. Yes. You violated 8 safety protocols, 3 local statutes, and 1 interspecies medical mandate. Chase waited. You are also the only reason the emergency response reform proposal has passed committee review in under 72 hours. Chase blinked. What? The Horkle nodded, albeit grudgingly. As of today, Terran response standards are being trialed for mixed species compatibility. Your methods lack elegance, but they work under duress. I could have told you that for free. The Horkle didn't smile. You are confined to the station for another 23 days, pending medical clearance and safety review. Chase tilted his head. And after that, you may choose to return to Earth or join our cross-disciplinary crisis corps as an embedded specialist. We'll leave the offer open. He turned, robes swishing, and departed without further ceremony. Chase rubbed his jaw. Crisis corps, huh? Relka, who had watched from the corner, smirked. They're going to have to build an entire sub-department to deal with you. I'll start by making them ditch the clipboard system. She handed him a new water pack. You know, for someone who got ignored for a whole century, you're making a lot of noise now. Chase leaned back against the wall. That's kind of Earth's thing. We start loud, end messy, but in between sometimes we actually fix stuff. In the mess hall later that evening, one of the Scalari guards from the original docking day approached Chase. She held a wrapped box. "What's this?" Chase asked. "A gift, from the Valon's Favor crew. Handmade." He opened it. Inside was a rough sculpture, clearly assembled with mismatched tools and limited skill. An EVA suit figure gripping a sparking cable planted on a broken hull plate. It had "Human Fixed It" scrawled underneath in half-translated letters. Chase stared at it for a long time. Then he smiled. Not wide, not proud, but real. The medbay was colder than usual. Chase sat shirtless on the diagnostic table, a padded sling still supporting his left arm. The bruises had faded into dull yellows and greens. A final scan ran across his ribs, revealing the thin white lines where bone had mended over the last few weeks. Real healing, slow and steady. Human healing. Relka reviewed the results without commentary. She didn't like small talk when something important was brewing. "You're clear for light duty," she said at last. "No lifting over 10 kilos. No vacuum work. No sudden acceleration. If you twist your torso too fast, I'll know. There's a sensor patch still on your flank." Chase nodded. "I wasn't planning to do backflips. I also disabled the diagnostic override in your locker. Stop trying to hack your clearance early." He smiled faintly. "Figured that wouldn't work twice." Relka closed the display. "You leave tomorrow, right?" "Transport out at dawn. 2 jumps to Luna Station, then I'm supposed to debrief on Earth. They want me to explain how I survived." She gave him a long look. "You didn't just survive, Chase. You made them change. That's rarer than you think." Chase tugged on his jacket, gingerly working his left arm into the sleeve. "I didn't mean to start a movement. I just didn't want to die in the middle of nowhere." That's exactly why it worked. The lights flickered once, harmless, a station power fluctuation. Chase didn't flinch. He noticed, but he didn't flinch. Recovery, in the deepest sense. Relka walked him to the departure deck the next morning. The Thresher had been hauled away for full deconstruction, a mercy, really. In its place stood a Union-class courier shuttle with D-38 assignment transport stenciled on the side. It was clean, too clean. "You're sure you want to go back?" Relka asked. Chase looked at the ship. "Earth's still home, even if it's the loud kid in the Galactic cafeteria no one wants to sit next to. You could stay. The Crisis Corps is waiting." Chase gave her a crooked grin. "Yeah, and I might still take the job. But if I'm going to teach anyone how we operate, they need to see Earth, see why we build things ugly and reinforce them with duct tape, why we test how far something can bend before we read the manual." Relka glanced down. "You're not angry about being left out anymore." "I'm still angry," Chase said. "But it's not about me. It's about the next guy who gets caught between a frozen starboard thruster and a silent comm band. If the Union actually listens now, if even one captain out there gets pulled out of a death spiral because someone stopped worrying about protocols long enough to act, then that's a win." She nodded, then surprised him with a small box, about palm size. "What's this?" "It's not handmade," she said, "but it's from the crew. Open it later." He tucked it into his jacket pocket and stepped onto the ramp. The shuttle door sealed behind him with a whisper. The flight back to Earth was uneventful. The crew, a mix of quiet Selnari and a chatty Dryan navigator named Mersch, kept mostly to themselves. Mersch asked a few questions, tentatively, about primitive propulsion and heat management under duress, but Chase kept the conversation light. He'd done enough teaching for 1 month. At Luna Station, the debriefing was clinical. 2 Terran commanders, 1 Union observer. Chase walked them through the accident, the field repairs, the emergency reroute, and the rest of it. They tried to analyze his decision tree. He told them it wasn't a tree, it was a hallway full of locked doors and one broken window. They didn't laugh. He was granted 2 weeks of paid leave, full medical compensation, no formal reprimand, which was itself a kind of quiet medal. Back home, flat in Chicago, 3 floors up, view of the lake, he opened the box Relka had given him. Inside was a fragment of the Thresher's outer hull, reshaped and polished. Not elegant, not smooth, but the scar lines had been cleaned and sealed with resin, a single word etched along the edge, in both Terran Standard and Galactic Basic. Unignored. Chase sat with it for a while. That night he got a comm from Relka. She didn't bother with greetings. "There's been another signal," she said. "Unregistered mining rig, spiral system. They're not Union. Anyone responding?" "No one yet. High-risk zone. Same problem as before." He didn't wait. "Send me the coordinates. I'll pack." "You just got back." "Doesn't mean I can't go out again." "Dalton, look, either we change things or we let the galaxy keep letting people die because the forms weren't filled in triplicate." Relka paused. Then her voice came through the channel, softer. "We'll keep a suit ready." 3 weeks later, a mining vessel barely clung to its orbit above a gas giant, its hull warped, thrusters sputtering. On board, 5 terrified operators waited for someone to acknowledge them. And then, like a ghost in an outdated shuttle patched with foreign parts and human markings, Chase Dalton dropped out of warp just shy of their orbit. He didn't speak right away. He didn't pose for gratitude. He sent a single message. Help is help, doesn't matter where it comes from. And that was how Earth began to earn its place. Not because it was strong, not because it was advanced, but because it showed up every time, even when no one asked it to. And over time,